This is the third part of my three-part series on fitting a Porsche Switchable Exhaust onto a 1998 Porsche 996 Carrera 2. The first two parts covered fitting the silencers and fitting the vacuum system. This third part is going to cover the electrics. First thing we need to do is to remove the driver's seat to give us better access. To do this, take off the plastic covers which cover the bolts, then undo the bolts. With the bolts removed, tilt the seat backwards to release the connector. If you look on the photo, you see my finger pointing to a slider which needs to be slid out so that the connector can be released. With that released, remove the seat. Be careful when removing the seat, they are heavy and it's easy to damage the sill covers. Then, underneath the dashboard, there's an air pipe. It's easier to work on the car with this removed. This just slides sideways to be removed. Also in the footwell of the driver's side is the fuse box cover. Pull the cover off. To get the fuse box cover off, firstly remove the door aperture seal by pulling it away from the edge. Then undo the 4 screws shown in this picture and remove the fuse cover. Above the fuse box is the relay support. This is what holds all the relays. We need to get to the back of this to do the work for the wiring. It's held on by a single nut as shown in the photograph here. To remove this 10mm nut, and then on the side there's a plastic clip which needs to be levered out. The relay support can then be removed from the car. Moving to the centre console, use a trim tool to remove one side from the horseshoe. You can start from the bottom and work your way up. This just unclips. Flip this over and use a screwdriver to release the pins so that you can push one of the blanks out. The switch needs to be wired into this position. Route the wiring underneath the dashboard back towards the relay board. Then, when the switch has been fitted, the trim can be pushed back into place. Make sure the wiring is secured properly with tie wraps or similar. For the wiring which runs from the relay board to the back of the car, we need to remove some trim. Firstly, where the boot and bonnet levers are, remove the plastic covers which cover up the bolts. Then, using a long Allen key, loosen the bolts. You don't need to remove them completely. Then use a trim tool to prise the cover up. The cover will come up along with the levers. If it's one of the later electrical ones, you'll need to undo the electrical connectors, otherwise this just comes up with the cabling. Moving further back down the car, remove the door trim aperture around the back of the door, then remove the coat hook at the top of the B pillar. This is done by lifting it out from the bottom with the trim tool. There's a screw behind it which needs to be removed. Then you'll also see a plastic cover which covers the bolt at the top of the seat belt. Remove the cover and remove the bolt. The B pillar cover can then be unclipped and removed. This will expose a screw at the top of the trim panel on the side, which you can see in this photograph. Undo this screw. Then at the back of the trim piece you'll need to lift and remove the rear carpet. You'll also need to remove the rear seat. To do this, prise off the plastic cover and then unbolt the seat back and remove the seat back. The bottom part of the seat just lifts off from the carpet. Undo the bolt that the top of the seat latches against, and then you can lift off the side panel, being careful to disconnect the speaker as you do so. You can then need to remove the sound insulation as shown in this photo. At the back of the car you'll need to undo and remove the seat belt and the mounting plate that the seat belt is attached to. This will then give us access to the grommet at the back. This grommet needs a 4mm hole drilling in it, which will enable the cable to pass through to the engine bay. Look inside the engine bay first, so make sure you can see the back of the grommet and you can see where the hole is going to come through. It isn't easy to get in with a drill to do this. I ended up using a pin chuck on an extension, but it's only drilling through rubber, so it does go through easily. You can then route the cable from the relay board back to the solenoid. My cable already had the connector installed, so I ran it backwards, starting at the engine bay and working through. I pulled it through the grommet by using a stiff wire and taping the flexible wire onto the stiff wire, then pulling it through. With all of the wires in place at the relay support, we're now ready to wire them up. There are 4 wires which need to be attached, as listed here. The speedo wire is optional. On the standard Porsche system, the system deactivates between certain speeds for noise purposes. If you wish to retain this function, then connect the speedo wire, otherwise just tape it up and leave it to one side. If it's left to one side, then the system will just activate based on the switch position on the dashboard. To fit the switches into the relay support, you need to remove the wire holders. These unclip from the rear of the relay support. Then remove the metal joiners which go across the front of them, and then use a screwdriver to prise out the red retainers. You can then fit the new sockets in, then refit the retainers and the metal joiners, and then replace them into the relay support. This is the relay that's used. There are two models of this. This is the later one, which has the ability to use the switch on the dashboard to operate the PSE. On the earlier systems it was an automatic one which just did the switching based on speed and had no option for override by the driver. With all the wires routed in place, you can now fit the relay into the relay support. This just pushes in from the back. Before refitting the relay support, be careful to make sure all the wires are routed out of the way around the back. You can then refit the support, refit the fuse board and the fuse board cover. You can now refit the seat and reconnect the battery ready for testing the system. I tested the system before reinstalling all of the interior panels, so I didn't fit the seat in properly. I just loosely bolted it in to make sure that it was connected up in case of any issues with any airbag lights. You will need to start the engine to run the test, as the engine needs to run to generate some vacuum. Once all of the systems tested, you can then remove the seat again, reinstall all of the interior panels and then refit the seat. Make sure that the battery is disconnected before you remove the seat. The system always starts up in the open state, so it will be on its loudest setting, and when the button is pressed on the dashboard, the solenoid should activate, which will move the actuators. The vacuum is retained for a long period of time, so you can test it with the engine stopped.